Today we're cooking up some red beans and rice. This is one of my absolute favorites. There's some prep time involved for sure, but it is absolutely worth the effort and it reheats just amazingly. So let's go ahead and get started. You'll need 1 pound of dried light red kidney beans, 1 green bell pepper, 2 small or medium yellow onions. These are not sweet onions, just plain old yellow onions, 4 ribs of celery, 6 cloves of garlic, or just an entire head if they're on the smaller side, 1 smoked ham hock, 4 to 6 thick slices of a hardwood smoked bacon. I use a double smoked bacon if I can find it, 12 ounces of andouille sausage. I've used things like Johnsonville or from the butcher counter. My favorite is the Manda brand, M-A-N-D-A. 4 to 6 cups of chicken broth. If you're trying to cut back on salt, you can use the low sodium version. I don't. A little bit of liquid smoke, 1 teaspoon of ground sage, 1 1/2 teaspoons of dried thyme. This is not ground thyme, just dried, 2 bay leaves, some kosher salt, and black pepper. And of course we need some rice to serve this with. I use just a steamed long grain white rice, but feel free to use whatever rice you'd like. I like to let my beans soak overnight, so I generally start this the night before. Put your dried kidney beans into a glass, plastic, or enameled container and cover them with about 1 inch or 2 of water. They'll soak up a whole lot more water than you might expect. Add 2 tablespoons of salt, give it a quick mix through, and then cover to cat-proof it for the night. So the beans can cook for as long as possible. Let's get those drained and into the slow cooker with the chicken stock. There's no need to rinse the beans, they can go straight in. These large cans of chicken broth are a tiny bit cheaper and happen to be about the perfect size, so I just buy one and use the entire thing. Go ahead and get the slow cooker going on low. This recipe cooks all day long, so you'll want to get your vegetables prepped first thing in the morning, if not the night before. I'm going to start by breaking down both onions. We're going for a relatively small dice, somewhere between peas or M&Ms in size. Start by slicing the top off the onion, and then cut the onion in half going down through the root. We always cut off the top rather than the bottom since the root helps hold things together while you're dicing. Remove any remaining peel as well as the rubbery outer layer of the onion. With the first onion half flat on the cutting board, make 2 horizontal cuts. The knife should be moving back toward the root end, angled slightly down, and you should stop your cut about 1/2 inch from the root. Make sure your hand and arm are clear of the knife path and never pull the knife toward your body. Now, make a series of vertical cuts about 1/4 inch apart. These should also stop about 1/2 inch from the root. Finally, turn the onion and finish your dice, holding the onion securely with your fingertips and making sure to keep your fingers and thumb tucked safely under while cutting. When the onion gets too small to feel stable, simply lay it down flat and finish dicing up to the root. Repeat this for your remaining onions. You may notice my cutting board wobbling quite a bit here. A nice trick is to get a hand towel wet and then wring it out really well and lay that flat underneath your cutting board before you start anything. And you can probably guess what I did not do before I started cutting. To dice the bell pepper, we'll start by cutting it into segments. Cut down through the pepper, starting from the outer edge of the stem. Work your way around the pepper, and then discard the center. Tap out any remaining seeds, and tear out any of the white foam-like parts. One at a time, lay each segment flat and cut long ways into thin strips. This type of cut is called julienne. Working in manageable batches, cut the pepper strips into a small dice, about the same size as your onions. When you're done, you can add these to the same bowl as your diced onion. By the way, just in case it needs to be said, always rinse and dry your vegetables before cutting. Dirt in your food is no fun, and wet vegetables are slippery. In French cooking, the holy trinity is onion, bell pepper, and celery. Trim off the tops and bottoms of your celery, if you'd like, it's all edible. Then carefully cut each celery rib long ways into 4 strips. Finish by dicing the celery, roughly the same size as your onion and bell pepper, and add it to your bowl. For your garlic, separate your cloves and then smash each one with the flat of your knife. Do this by laying your knife flat on the clove and then giving it a good whack with the heel of your hand. Unfortunately, I kept knocking down our super fancy camera rig every time I did this. Remove the skins from the garlic cloves and then trim off the root ends. Thinly slice the garlic and then run your knife through it a few times to mince. A garlic press would also work for this step. We don't add the garlic to the rest of our vegetables until the very end, so put your minced garlic into a separate bowl. And that's the last of our vegetables. There's not just a ton of herbs and spices for this recipe, so we're going to get them measured out into a small bowl so they're easy to add later. We need 1 teaspoon of ground sage and 1.5 teaspoons of dried thyme. Salt and pepper will get added as needed later on. We need a bit of fat to cook down our vegetables. You could use a tablespoon of vegetable oil, but I prefer to just use the leftover fat from our bacon. Start your bacon in a cold pan and then crank up the heat to medium or medium-high. Starting in a cold pan helps the fat render or melt out and keeps the bacon from curling up as much. Cook the bacon until it's browned, but not super crispy, and then add it to the beans in your slow cooker. We only need a few tablespoons of bacon fat, so carefully spoon out any excess. I keep an old glass nearby for this. You can either save the extra bacon fat for cooking, or wait until it cools and scrape it into the trash. Never pour oil or fat down the drain. Turn your heat down to medium and add the onion, bell pepper, and celery to the pan. Give it a quick toss or stir to distribute the bacon fat, and then hit it with a few generous pinches of salt. This helps draw the water out of the vegetables so they cook down faster. Let this cook down for a good 15 to 20 minutes, stirring occasionally. You're wanting the vegetables to become translucent and start to darken, especially the onion. If the edges start browning too much before the vegetables look cooked, just add a bit more bacon fat. Once everything is cooked, it's time to add our garlic and spices. Add a good 5 to 10 grinds of black pepper, along with your sage, thyme, and garlic. Stir to combine thoroughly, and then cook for another 45 seconds to a minute, until the garlic becomes fragrant. Then scrape everything into your slow cooker with a spatula. You're done with the stove for now, so you can turn off the heat. You typically don't need to stir things in a slow cooker, but I like to mix everything together a bit right at the beginning. Take out one of your ham hocks. The ones at my grocery store come in packs of 2 or 3, so I freeze the rest. Nestle the ham hock into your slow cooker. Usually one side is wider, with more bones visible. I put that side up so the bones are less likely to fall out into the stock as it cooks. Add 2 bay leaves and 5 or 6 drops of liquid smoke. Now put the lid on and let it go. We might as well start our rice while we're at it. For our beans and rice, I use about 4 cups of rice and I fill the steamer to the 4-cup line. Add a pinch of salt and stir everything together to make sure the water is still at the correct mark. Close it up, turn it on, and let it go. By now, our beans have been cooking on low for about 5 or 6 hours. In the past, I've had issues with the ham hock breaking apart and leaving tiny bones hidden in the beans. I'm super paranoid about that now since it pretty much ruins the entire pot of beans, so now I pull it out, trim off the meat to add back into the beans, and discard the bones. When I first started making this recipe, I put the sausage in at the beginning and let it cook all day. It seemed like all the spiciness went straight into the beans, and the sausage itself ended up kind of bland and mealy. So waiting until the last few hours to add the sausage seems to help with both the flavor and the texture. Heat up some vegetable oil or some of your leftover bacon fat until the oil is shimmery. Cut your sausage into thick slices and then lay them flat in the hot oil. Cook until nicely browned, and then flip. Once both sides are browned, add the sausage to the slow cooker. My wife prefers to have more, smaller pieces of sausage in the beans, so I quarter mine before adding them in. Now, turn the slow cooker to high and let things cook for a few more hours. If the beans are already soft enough, start smashing quite a few up against the side of the crock with a wooden spoon. This will help the beans start to thicken up. We're in the home stretch now. Slow cookers are awesome, but they're not so great about reducing stock or letting moisture escape. I like my beans and rice to be nice and thick, so I transfer my beans to a large pan on medium-high heat. To keep from splashing, I ladle about half my beans into the pan first, and then pour the rest once the crock isn't quite so full. Smash more of the beans with your spoon or a potato masher. I'd say we're trying to smash about half of our beans. The beans should come to a boil pretty quickly, but they'll still take quite a while to thicken up. Now's a good time to start picking out anything that won't be in the final dish. Using tongs or a slotted spoon, remove the bay leaves, bacon, and the meat from the ham hock. Double check to make sure no bones fell out of the ham hock as well. This recipe is almost a bit nerve-wracking. Every time I make it, I freak out because it looks like crappy soup. 3 hours later, still crappy soup. Then at the very last minute, bang, it's magically red beans. Just keep boiling it down, keep smashing beans, and trust that it will happen. When the beans are as thick as you'd like, turn the heat off, ladle it up over a bowl of rice, and enjoy.